Across so many areas of life, we are looking for ways to do things faster, cheaper, more efficiently. But should we actually be taking that approach with creativity? And what happens with creativity and craft in a world that is really clearly prizing speed and automation? Hello and welcome. My name is Abi Gatling, and I'm on a journey to uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive, and open their imagination. And basically, I want to find out how people come across creative solutions and then how they use them at home, at work, at play, and everything in between. And my goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you'll be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. So today I am speaking with Jesse Feister, who is the executive director of Webby Media Group, who run the Webby, Lovey, and Anthem Awards. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, no, it's really good. I came across you. I'm on your new email newsletter list, and I was like, I have to reach out to you to have a chat. But before we talk about exactly that, do you want to give us a little bit of background of the awards and how you got involved with that?
Yeah. So the Webby Awards are turning 30 this year.
Oh,
So we've been around for almost 30 years and have always recognized the best of the internet. The best creativity on the internet has been like the sort of mission of the awards from day one. And that was something really different in 1996 when it was founded, right? The internet was new, it was unproven, and there were a lot of people trying new things and new ways of creating. And there wasn't a lot of recognition for that work, even though it was interesting and valuable and ended up obviously changing the world. And the people who jumped on the internet and started creating really set the standards for creativity that we still are sort of working within. So the Webbies have been around for 30 years. We've seen so many different shifts of technology and the internet changing how people create, changing how people reach other people, and really bringing more people into the fold too, right? Because it means it opened up new vectors of creating that allowed all sorts of people to make things that wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. So the Webbies have recognized the best of the internet for 30 years now. We've seen it through websites at the beginning, all the way through social media, video and film, everything you can imagine in between. And we strive to really represent the best across the entire creative gamut of what happens on the internet. So we have a lot of categories that fit different types of creativity. They span 8 different media types, everything from we still have a lot of websites and mobile developers, but also people making social content for advertising, creators, you name it. Really, there's a category at the Webbies, and our goal is to just recognize the best and make sure the people who are making things on the internet get that recognition that they deserve.
yes, so cool. And I sort of came across you because I have been a contributing judge to the Webbies, which was so
Thank you very
exciting.
much.
Oh,
Thank you,
you're
Abby.
welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it because you're literally seeing the best of the best, and it was so inspiring to have a look at all these different portfolios. But yeah, I reached out to you because I wanted you to be on the podcast because I received the newsletters and you wrote this really interesting one a couple of weeks ago that really piqued my interest. And it was called What Happens to Craft When Everything Speeds Up? And I suppose it like essentially talks about the impact that this emphasis on speediness and automation is having on craft. So that was an interesting thing. And given your current role, like what prompted you to write about this?
Well, I think it's one of the big conversations right now is how are people going to learn how to make things when it's so easy to make things? And
Mm,
a lot of us who have been creative for a long time became creative by learning a craft, by learning a discipline, and that takes time. it should take time because the ability to make decisions, the ability to understand your decisions, and the choices you make are ultimately your creative lens, and the capacity to master that and make the right choices time and time again require struggle. They require effort. They require like really like being bad for a long time, but slowly getting better and building the muscles that you need to sort of have a true grasp or mastery of a craft. For me, it was music. So I was a long time musician. I was a drummer, and I started out on rudiments. Right, it was just for years just practicing over every day, hours and hours a day to master how to hold the drumsticks, how to play rhythm, how to play different sorts of styles of drumming, and then eventually playing that out in the world with different types of musicians. It really took time to get to a point where I felt not just proficient, but could sort of get into a flow state and feel like I had, somewhat mastered the craft. Though by no means there was still so much room to grow, but it took years to achieve that. But it also gave me a really strong sense of how the choices that I were making, and I had built them up over time. And I think that that's universal to a lot of creative people, a lot of creative professionals. They've developed a skill over time, and it's that thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and all of those choices and all of that bad work that allows you to then have a perspective that you can bring to something and make it great. So right now, we're living in an age where, particularly with AI, it's really, really easy to make things, and you can make things quickly that are pretty good, right? Like it's the things that maybe would have had to take years to be able to do on your own. You can kind of have an LLM spit it out pretty quickly, and so it's just a big question in the creative community right now. What's going to happen to us, and what does this mean? And again, I wanted to pose the question because I think it's really interesting, but I also don't have my answer is somewhere in between because technology has always changed how we create.
Mm.
And if you go back to how people made even music 50 years ago, it's different than how it is today. So the technology itself can enable creativity and it can be a vehicle for new types of craft to evolve. And the act of making is constantly going to be sort of in a relationship with technology. Granted, you want, there are people who retain that sort of like traditional craft and that's still valuable and still has a place, but people don't make things the same way they used to. And so now we're in this next
Mm.
phase, this next inflection point, and in some ways it looks very similar because you're like, well, this is what happens. Technology changes things and speeds up. How different is this now? Are we going to develop new forms of craft? Is this going to enable more people to be average and maybe not develop craft, but then the people who are really putting the time in will have mastered it at a different level? It's just interesting. I don't have the answers, but it's a big topic right now, and I wanted to just explore that idea because there's sort of a friction between or a tension between craft and speed. Whereas it's almost like to become really good at something and develop a craft, the time put in is the point. It's not
Mhm.
just about getting able to do it, being able to do it. It's like how you do it and how you develop the capacity to do it. And so with automation, everything is about speed and efficiency, which there's tremendous value in that. And I think it's going to open up all sorts of tremendous forms of creativity, but it is different. And I think the questions that our community are asking right now are right, which is, what does this mean? So the Webby's view, it's important to us because we're recognizing creativity on the internet, and we've done that for years. So this is a new era for that. The questions are massive. Like, did you make this? How? Like, what choices need to go into a creative output for it to be yours? We're sort of like grappling with those questions right now, but I think broadly, we look at the evolution of technology as sort of a something that works hand in hand with how craft evolves. But I don't think we have the answers yet with all of the AI. It's come so quickly that everyone's sort of like, wow, this is really different over just like 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many questions in there that you've raised that I was like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. But it seems like, these changes in technology are unlocking the opportunity for more people to engage with their creativity. Previously, maybe people didn't have the skills to film their own things and edit it and all that sort of stuff. But now your iPhone makes it so simple to do that, and there's so many apps that do a lot of it for you. But is that at the detriment of craft where people are doing things manually?
Right. And so one of the things I think I mentioned in this newsletter was, it lowers the barrier to entry, but it lowers the barrier to output, not to craft. So you can make something fast, but it's not necessarily lowering the barrier to being really good at something. It's
Mm.
raising the bar of what the median is. So like the average person now can create something up
Mm.
here that maybe was not able to create before, but to be excellent, to move someone and to really like have the intentionality behind the work. I don't think that that goes away. I think if anything, we have to figure out how to use these tools in really, really elite ways to change the world in all the ways that you can change it now. But again, it hurts to think that I could have learned an instrument and it doesn't matter anymore. That's not exactly what happened, but drums is a pretty good example of like, drum machines and digital recording changed music dramatically.
Mm.
And there were session drummers in every recording studio across the world. There aren't that many anymore, right? You can make a lot of drum sounds at home on your computer, and even professional records are made with a different type of creativity than there used to be made. So I sit with it in sort of I don't think it's a good or a bad as much as it's just something we need to address with intentionality and try to establish like what are the values that we really believe in, and would they go beyond just being able to like make something on the surface. It's like what do we want to hold with us as we evolve, because we need to really be in touch with what those core creative values are and see if we can bring them to the next iteration of whatever the tools are.
Yes. It was interesting actually when you were talking before about being a drummer, and I was like, oh, surely that can't be evolved more. But obviously, I do know there's all these, you know, synthetic sounds that you can make. But, the physical act of drumming, is that important to creating a drum sound? I don't know, like analog drumming as opposed to
Yeah.
digital drumming.
I think it's a different expression. So if you are going to perform drums live, you're going to bring something to it from yourself. If you're going to make a drum beat on a computer, you could still bring yourself to that. It's just a different form of that expression. And so, yeah, you do lose some things about the performance of playing live that I think are really important, but I don't think they're like essential to making music. I think you can make music many different ways. And so, again, like I also think we have to be clear-eyed about the fact that you do lose things when technology evolves. We lose some things that we really care about. I loved recording in big recording studios. There's just something really special about having a group of people together. You hear sounds, the way that people record music was really distinctive, and it made something special to be in that room, but it was hard to get access to. It was expensive. There were only a few in any given city. And so now you can do it anywhere. And so that's a good thing too. So we lose some things as technology evolves, but we also hopefully gain more than we lose. But I don't think we should deny the fact that you do lose things along the way as things change.
Yes. In your article, you mentioned something along the lines as craft resists efficiency. And that kind of struck a chord with me because, I run a digital marketing agency, and one of the things that we do is that we write content for people. We extrapolate their brand, and we're constantly writing articles for their socials, websites, and all that sort of stuff. And one of our clients the other day was like, "What are you doing? Like, you should just be using AI for this." And I was like, but like,
Yeah.
what is my value if I'm literally just putting the inputs into an AI generative, machine to come up with these articles? But there's this drive for efficiency. And I'm like,
Right.
am I resisting this efficiency?
Right.
Oh, in there's doing that. Like, where's my value sit? So is that what you meant by that, by resisting efficiency of like that kind of losing the soul of the craft?
A little bit. I think yes, and I would say just the efficiency is not how you get really. You don't master a craft by being hyper efficient necessarily. It's like actually the struggle that makes you capable of like knowing how you got to where you are, so you can make good choices. So I kind of mean the craft is if you're doing something with craft, it's not necessarily the most efficient way to do something. It might be the best way. And I think there's different settings where that matters more than others. And that's why it's challenging now because we're at a time where we have to like parse out like, well, when does it make sense to really put my craft into something versus can I develop a new craft for how to manage a technology tool or something? I don't know exactly what that right decision is. It probably depends on who you are and where you are, but doing something quickly doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it with masterful craftsmanship. You know, you can make a chair really, really quickly with mass production, but if a handcrafted chair is worth something and it's made differently, but we also wouldn't have as many chairs if everybody had to make them by hand. So there's just sort of well, I think you just look at it with open mind and say there's a lot of good on both sides of this, but we have to make the decision for ourselves, like when it makes sense to lean in one way or the other.
So it doesn't seem like you're talking about handmade chair versus mass-produced chair. The reason why people go for the mass-produced chair, the businesses making themselves is for economic reasons,
Right.
scalability and all that sort of stuff. And for people buying that is also for the same thing, is that it's definitely more expensive to go with a handcrafted chair. Is it like a privilege for the few that, when you get to focus on craft, perhaps?
It's a good question.
Not that I
I
expect you to
think
have the answer. It's a
in the
big
right in depends on the setting. I think you know, the efficiency frontier, if you will, like where the world is in terms of efficiency, what's possible with the amount of resources that you have changes every year. Technology kind of brings that forward.
question.
And so there is a reality to if you're in a business, running a business, you need to stay close to that frontier, that efficiency frontier, because you won't compete if you're not. There will be someone else who can do the same thing for lower price. However, you might be able to do something better and more distinctive because of the approach that you take, and that can like change the dimensions as to which you compete. So it really depends. I would say it depends on what you're going for. It's harder, I would say, to make something that is distinctive and analog and you know beautifully flawed, and have that be valuable to as valuable as you need it to be for you to make it. But there are going to be examples of people doing that. I think it's going to be more valuable than ever because you're going to want to stand out. Uh, and if everybody can make the same thing the same way, you have to do something else to stand out. So I think it's going to be a really interesting couple years because we're going to sort of redefine how what excellence looks like because the bar is sort of raised in a weird way that's made it easier to make things that are average. So how do you stand out when what used to be, you know, excellent is now average? I think people will figure it out. Creative people figure those questions out all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a new creative challenge. I think it's interesting though. I think like with any sort of big change like this, there's always going to be the early adopters who are doing it, and then there's those skeptics who are just like, I don't know about
Yeah.
that. But then in a few years' time, it's going to be the norm. And if you're not doing it, people are going to think that you're just like left behind. You're not with the times.
Yeah. Unless you are so distinctively amazing at what you do, that may be a privilege then, right? Or maybe it's just the privilege of talent or the privilege of being in the highest percentile of excellence that you can do it your way no matter what. And whatever the cost is to that, people are still going to want it. I do think that we have to at least embrace the tools that are available and see how they can work for us, but not take them for not just sort of, you know, we need to question and look into our values to understand like how should I approach this to do this in a way that's authentic to me, and what does authenticity to me really mean? I try to step back and say, well, I don't want to just be the function of something I can make with my hands. Maybe I can be, it's in my mind. It's what I want to say. So, but it's hard if you've dedicated your whole life to mastering a craft to have to redefine that. But I do think that that's a worthy exercise for the sake of evolving. Because as you said, the world continues to change. You're better off if you can at least embrace the things that are good for you about that.
Yeah. And I do think that's an interesting thing is that, I mean, I do think there's a certain amount of skill involved in being able to use these tools efficiently because it's not all the same. Good, like great inputs get great outputs. Average inputs get average outputs. That's
Yeah.
still going to be, it's not a leveler in that sense.
But knowing what you want too, right? Is
Mm.
is sort of what you're saying. It's like, okay, it's prompting, but you have to have a point of view that you bring to that prompt. And I've seen people who are the best stuff I've seen are really they have a clear vision. So if you can use a tool to achieve your vision, for some people it's amazing to have access to these new tools because they're like, I can finally make a movie. I have it inside of me. I just didn't have the resources. It's probably harder than people would think to make a great movie. Almost certain of it. But it's interesting to think that the it becomes more and more important what your judgment is and what your vision is and how your point of view and your perspective is actually what um, retains. It may not be the means by which you make, but it's like how you bring your perspective to work that ultimately I think is going to be what still matters no matter what.
Yeah, I think that, there's always that debate of it, whether the output is the most important thing or whether it's the process to get there. And I think that is kind of what this whole thing is about, is that if you can produce something that is meaningful and high quality, it doesn't really matter that you have used all these new products and technology to speed up that process to get there.
Right. I mean, you could say the same thing about Photoshop. I mean, again, I keep using the metaphor, but we don't criticize graphic designers for using Photoshop. Now, granted, I think this is different. I think this is a different type of tool, so I don't want to say it's exactly the same metaphor, but I do try to look to those examples as, there are still plenty of people making tremendously amazing work using tools that would have seemed like cheating, you know, 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? They've figured out how to evolve their craft.
Mm.
And I hope that that's where we end up. I believe we will end up there with AI, but the speed is so different, right? It's changing so fast that it does take time for people to sort of evolve with the technology.
Yeah, and it's hard to see how that's going to change. Oh, I mean, so I used to work at a university, right? And they were so hyper vigilant about anyone using any type of AI as part of assessment because that was seen as cheating. Um, but now when all these things are built into so many of these tools, you gave the example of Photoshop, there are so many generative tools and like automations within Photoshop that you can use with just a click of a button. Uh, at what point will the universities and, other institutions start to go, actually, that's a valid way of using this tool. It's not
Yeah.
actually cheating. Like it's kind of
It's
like your question before about what does it mean to create what have I actually created this when I've used all these tools? That's really interesting to me.
I think the schools are like on the front lines because every college age or university age student is like they just use whatever the most current version of technology is. I think I don't envy being in the position of having to make those choices as like an administrator because you want to embrace the tools as they evolve, but you also know that learning is not just output. It's actually is the process, and it's kind of that is that idea of craft. Like you might need to write by hand to be able to think a certain way, or you don't want like writing is not for me just about output. It's about thinking because my thoughts become more clear as I write, and I use that as a way to sort of make sense of what I'm thinking. And I've been able to achieve some of that using AI back and forth. Like there's something valuable to like having a dialogue with a machine that helps you think, but you don't want to take the process away from students. They need to learn how to make things. On the other hand, they don't need to learn how to make things like they were made in 1554, right? Like there is a you do want to stay with the times, but you don't want to lose those core values. So I don't know. I'm glad I'm not a school administrator.
I was sort of having this sort of with someone the other day, and I was kind of likening it to, builders or contractors that now they've got these electric saws and things like that. is that cheating as opposed to using a handsaw? No one would ever think that because you're like, no, well, it's like
Right.
less physically demanding on your body. You can be more accurate, It was kind of the
Right.
same thing, but it wasn't until I kind of gave that context to this friend of mine who was a real AI skeptic, that
Yeah.
they're like, oh, like yeah, like I guess I've never really thought of it that way.
And I tend to agree. I try to look at it that way because I think it is, you could just see time and time again throughout history, that's what happens. There's a technology, it feels crazy, and then people get used to it and the world changes. Is AI different? It feels kind of different because like, you can see how the axe chops wood and then you see the saw and you're like, okay, that's like a better version of that, but it does feel a little bit different with than even like a Photoshop where you could do things maybe faster or better. But now you're now you're sort of engaging with strategy and like a higher form of decision support that feels pretty different. So I don't know, but again, if you just look at history, you will see to me, and this is what I put my faith in, is that the world changes and you can really see the patterns. And this really looks like a lot of the other patterns that we've seen over the years, but it still feels different. But that's probably how it always felt to everybody. So I don't know.
Mm. So how is this playing out in the world of the Webbies, where people are submitting their best websites, their best content to you for assessment? Does it matter whether someone has like handcrafted these things, or does it matter whether they've used like a generative tool to create this website?
I think it depends ultimately on if you can connect with your audience. Can you connect with another person? And that's really what cre creativity is about, at least in many forms, is about I have something to say, I want someone to hear it. And if there's a way to use a tool that can provide you that path, I think that people can kind of, we have as you know, you're a judge yourself. We have a lot of different perspectives judging work. Not every work is judged by multiple judges. We try to get a well-rounded view on what people think across the board. We're not asking about the tools people use, or we haven't historically. We're still kind of talking through how we will approach that moving forward, but we don't ask if you use Photoshop. We just want to see, could you make something that connected? So I think that that will ultimately be always the rubric is you have to connect with another person. You can use AI and miss. We see it all the time. You see it on LinkedIn all day now. It's hard to scroll LinkedIn because you can just see that there's a computerized voice coming out of half the people posting, and that's not excellent, right? That's not great work. We're seeing it and feeling like an aversion to it. So I wonder, I believe, and again, we're just going to keep an eye on it and keep watching the work as it comes in and try to really make sure that we're not wrong. But I think ultimately, like connecting with people is hard to do, and it comes from something that is what makes you a human. So my hope is that that will continue to translate regardless of the tools. It definitely is going to change the caliber and nature of the work, but I don't think the act of connecting with another person through your work is going to change.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I see this a lot in my business is that, well, people are like, oh, well, why would I pay you to do my logo when I can just get ChatGPT or Canva or something else to create me one? And it's kind of like what you said there is that so much thought goes into designing something like that and you're trying to express a certain thing and you're trying to extrapolate what the core of that business is and display it in this visual. And I suppose like sometimes those layers are just not there when it's like a generative thing that is just
Yeah,
going, oh, here's something that looks nice, but it has no depth to it.
yeah, and I think it's hard to it's a hard thing to real I do think not everybody pays attention to what they consume. So there are going to be people who it's fine to just like there's probably a lot of media that will just be fine because it didn't need to do that much and what people needed to say you can get the point across with a pretty cheap average way of saying it. But I don't think that that's going to be the stuff that stands out. I don't think that that's like the excellence. I do think it makes average easier, but excellence is still going to be hard. And where does excellence really matter is sort of a business question. There might be some things you really want to invest your time into because it's the highest value point, but there might be other things that it's okay to
Mm,
just say, well, we can automate many of these things, but we're going to keep the things that make us distinct,
mm,
here with us and really put our time there. And that would be a great thing, actually, because you're moving your creativity to where it can have the most impact and where it really matters. Whereas a lot of times maybe we might look back and say, well, we spent all this time on all these things, and the only things that really mattered to people out in the world were this top 5%. And now we can put 100% of our energy into this top 5% and really focus on connecting. Whereas the stuff that no one was paying attention to, we don't have to spend our time with anymore. We can move to where it really matters. That's one way of looking at it. I hope that that's
mm.
how it turns out. I think it will, because I think you have to not everything we make for commercial purposes connects with people the same way. It's a range, right? It's a subject line from a company that you're not paying attention to doesn't matter to you as much as sort of like that precious moment that you're sort of crafting for the best customer or something. So I don't know, it'll be interesting, but I hope it moves us into where people really need to feel connection more, so we can focus our energy there.
Yeah. I really liked what you said before that it's not lowering the bar, but it's raising the standards. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it because yeah, I think you mentioned LinkedIn and how like everyone kind of sounds the same. There's a very distinct way that say something like ChatGPT would write a LinkedIn post.
Yeah, you just know it when you see it.
Oh yeah, once you get your eye in, you're like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
And so people do question that authenticity and they're craving the human touch. So I do think that we are getting so many efficiencies in some ways, but I do think that people are really in recent times are trying to regain that human connection, as you know, especially since 2020 and like all that stuff where everyone's
Yeah.
so separated. I think that's a really big emphasis at the moment.
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk about this year, throughout the Webby season, but trust is the key to the whole thing.
Mm.
And, when you're credible, when you do have trust with your audience, it allows you to use these tools, in ways that you can still feel are authentic and they feel are authentic, right? You can't lose that trust, but the AI sort of cheating on LinkedIn, if you will, it's not even cheating, but just the AI slop that you see is not, it doesn't come from, like, no one trusts you anymore, right? So how do you continue to have trust as you evolve the tools that you use? You can lose that trust really quickly, but if you do it the right way, you can use it you can strengthen it potentially because you're giving more and you're able to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I mentioned the struggles that I have with, you know, when to use automations and AI and stuff in my business. And I'm really for automation. I have chosen to go and automate the things that I think are low value, but allow us to dedicate more time to those high value tasks, which I think is great client experience, the creative and strategic thinking, that type of thing. I mean, I don't need to physically write my emails. I don't need to manually create folders and stuff like that. Automate all that boring stuff.
Yeah.
Leave me the
Focus on the
fun
stuff that
stuff.
really matters, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that's I think that's the right way to look at it. We try to been having the same conversations in our business, like what matters most. And, how do we spend more of our time on that? Um, Especially when you can now, because we used to have to do certain things.
Mm.
Let's figure out what really matters and make sure that we put as much of our energy there as we can. And I think it comes down to to you said, like the client experience, human things that sort of help bring connection to each other is, I think, always going to be at a premium. That it gives me hope. I believe those things are true. I like to think that that's true. But I'm very excited about what all this technology can do for us. But the craft, we don't want to lose. I don't think we will lose craft, but I do think a lot of our community is struggling with this,
Mm.
idea right now, because it feels like everything that they care about is just being, is disappearing or like dissolving. So I don't think that act of mastering something is going to go out of style. I think it might change, but I think ultimately you're always going to look to the masters and say, well, that's just amazing to watch someone work at that level. It's just hard to think that that's going to go away because of technology, but I do think it will change.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, you've raised so many questions in your newsletter and today, but I don't think we're going to have the answers for for a while,
No, no,
Jesse.
it could take a while.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
plenty of that gives us plenty of time to continue having podcast conversations. It's a good topic. It's just such a big idea right now. There's
Mm,
so many questions.
mm.
So
And people are so interested in it. They're so interested in it that they just can't get enough and just trying to make this connection of like, what does it mean? What does the future look like because of this? What do I have to do to change and stay on top of all of this? It's
it's scary too, right? It's scary to think that as things are not going to be the same as they were, but as the Webby Awards, that I think it's partially our role in this sort of community to show people what excellence looks like as the world changes. And we have a track record of doing that. We have a playbook for doing that as technology changes creativity. And so we're going to lean into that and really try to define what creative excellence is in this new world too.
yeah, so cool. So if people want to get involved in the Webbies, what's the best way that they can do that?
Webbyawards.com is our website. We will be opening our entries, call for entries for next season soon in the next couple months. And really excited for this year. It's just such a change, a sea change, and it's our 30th anniversary. So it feels like a good time to be talking about how the internet has changed the world over different eras because this feels like one of those moments. And so
Mm,
it's exciting, but it's also like, we've talked internally. It's part of our job is to help people make sense of these things. We don't have the answers, but we have to grapple and we have to talk to people like you and our judges. We have more than 3,000 judges across every domain of creativity, including technology and the arts, right? Runs the gamut. We bring those perspectives in. We try to listen to them. We try to synthesize and take a stab at like this is what it means right now. We think, and will evolve as the world continues to change.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, for joining me today. I feel there's lots of questions, but I'm excited to continue to explore it, and I'm also looking forward to seeing what happens in the Webbies this year because the standard just gets, the bar keeps being lifted, as you said.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for being a Webby judge. We're so grateful.
And while we're saying thank you, I want to say thanks to everyone who's tuned in to Creativity Uncovered today. If you enjoyed this episode, yeah, please share it around so other people can join in this conversation because I think it's really interesting. And as always, get in touch if this episode has inspired you and you want to chat about it more. And until next time, take care. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.